welcome to the 21st Men. My name is Vince. As you all know, this is the cast. Jose, Rakim. Oh, what's your name again? I forgot. Luis, Christian, Justin, and Rashad. Thank you so much for being here. Today we are talking about the criminal justice system and how it translates for men, how men are viewed in regards to the law. So let me just go ahead and ask, do you think men are viewed differently as opposed to women?
I mean, I carry a white family, a picture of them, and put them on my window, so when the cops come, I'm good.
I do the same thing.
Post it on there. As soon as they see it, they go, "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't know. You're good." So,
do you think that the criminal justice system is biased towards men?
I mean, just go see the movie Black and Blue. I don't know.
In general, as men, do you think that the criminal justice system is
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
What about particularly against men of color?
Definitely. Yeah.
How so?
I mean, I judge according to the fruit. I don't judge. I don't know the heart for real. I just keep seeing the same thing on the news. I keep seeing the same thing on social media. I mean, when it gets to a point where you see more of injustice towards people of color than people of color, then you got to start questioning. All right, what's going on? I'm not the guy to be like, Black power this and we need reparations. I mean, I would like that, but I'm just saying, because that's a whole nother conversation. Right. But when you look at it at its core, I still meet up with seniors that were alive during a time of segregation. We're not that far from it. And so to think that these people aren't still here is nonsense. Like, I literally just talked with a couple clients last week, and she was telling me about, oh yeah, I remember when we used to have this, just like this tables divided, that's how we were in the schools. I remember when they integrated the schools where we lived. And I was like, wow. So yeah, I do think it's still, real.
Do you... Okay, so you think that it's real. Do you think that, in general, that the 13th Amendment helps plagiate that? Are you familiar with what the 13th Amendment is?
Yes, but when they just because you added a law doesn't mean you took it from the hearts.
Okay. So the 13th Amendment basically stated that, to sum it up, everyone is equal rights, native, born, all of that stuff. Equal rights until, and no one shall be treated like slaves or anything like that again, and abolish that slavery unless you were arrested or put into prison, and then those rights were gone. So in general retrospect, you could be treated as such, a slave. And in the time that those amendments were written and enforced, right? I mean, we all know history in America as, we have segregation, you have civil rights movements and all these kind of things. Do you think that amendment helped put people, especially men of color, but not just men of color at that time, behind bars purely to put them back into slavery?
Well, back then, it's a different mentality back then. You have people that were acting or doing stuff because they still were either racist or trying to take over control of certain movement. Jacksonville is the best example. Jacksonville used to be this big, but when the Black community came to Jacksonville, now they expanded out of Jacksonville, and now let's make all this Duval County, because now we need more people than what we had. Now we have those white over there, those white over there, those white over there, and now we end up being bigger in numbers. So back then, yes, it helped in a way of flagging and there's one step, one rock. You don't build Rome in one day. So it was like something like that. And I understand that, yes, it was also being abused. Because back then, the police back then was not a police. It was actually the patrol slave. That's the difference.
The real question, the underlying question, and this is for the people on the table, is that do you think that the system is intentionally trying to incriminate people of color? And then if that's the case, what's the benefit from it? Because there's like Latino police officers, there's Black police officers, there's Black sergeants and generals, and we had a black president last. There's evidence to support that it doesn't exist. There's evidence on both sides. So I'm just curious what you guys have.
So it triggers down different ways. You mentioned police. So the police, most of the time, even though they say they don't have quotas, they do have quotas.
Sure.
I have family members, they used to be police officers all the way to running the whole department, chief of departments. And they do have a quota. You know, it's not a verbal quota, but yes, you have to meet certain criteria.
Are those quotas different for those of color as opposed to not?
And the experience that, because I did brought up that question to certain, members of mine that work here in the United States. And it's not that it's towards men of colors or Hispanic. The fact is that sadly, TV, media, yellow, the news, everything gives you the fact that, there's something called the red zones, right? So the red zones is the fact that when this is red zone day, it's basically you're gonna go to areas that that high crimes might happen, and you're gonna bump up your arrests and do everything.
Which always happens to be blacker areas.
Sadly.
Why?
Because
why are they all blacker areas?
Because there's big reasons. Reason number one is, the white community itself, you don't see them hanging out the same way that either black or Hispanics do. And take I'm gonna take New York. When you go to New York and you go to the Bronx, you go to Brooklyn, you go to those, big predominant crime areas, it's black and Hispanics.
Do you think it's deeper than that, Wes?
I do. Just from a spiritual background, spiritual viewpoint, looking at it, I know that the devil's going to continue using what has always worked, and racism is something that works. Not saying that people working underneath law enforcement have a personal agenda to fulfill racism, but if they're not working on themselves and what they think, what it means to be a man, if they're not working on their spirits and whatnot, it's going to reflect in how they, how they go out and do what they do.
What about districting, right? I mean, back in the 50s and the 60s, people wouldn't loan, financial sectors wouldn't loan to those of color because they would put them in certain areas on purpose. So that way they'd say, this area, we're not giving a loan to. This area, we're not giving a loan to. Why? Because of redlining, and you got that, like you were saying. So, but redlining, red zoning, there's a similarity there. And my question is, do those areas predominantly have people of color because of redlining?
Well, they weren't destroyed, and they sure as heck, no one went there to say, all right, we're gonna mix it up now. So yeah, they still exist because guess what? People still lived there during that time, had children, and their children had children, and that just grew to be even predominantly more black or of color.
I was sorry.
No, go ahead. Louis was going to speak.
Yeah. So so I grew up in, a pretty rough Latino area, right? So, it was me, my mom, and my little brother, and it doesn't get any more rough than literally living on the street, right? And even when we weren't living on the street, we lived in, I guess what is considered kind of like a Latin-based project, right? And what you find is a lot of the times when people come, and I'm originally from San Diego, so when people would come, whether legally or illegally from across the border, you work a little bit and you get to the first place that actually makes sense financially, right? Which breaks down into the quintiles, right? The lower quintiles is normally when you're trying to get your foot or get your feet on the ground started. That's kind of where you go. Just like the projects. The projects were intended as a stepping stone to the next place. But what happened? We created almost like a socially acceptable way of life to stay stagnant, right? So instead of saying, hey, this is just a stepping stone. Hey, you're working at McDonald's. This is just a stepping stone. It's, okay, well, what can I do to cater to stay here, right? And that's kind of what, I found our life was, right? Like, what did my mom end up doing? She became a prostitute, right? What do I have to do to stay here? I became a prostitute because I can work right outside, right? I don't have to go far. I don't have to move. And then what happens? You get stuck. Because if you move to the next place, okay, great. I can move into the suburbs, but I can't prostitute outside, right? So I think we create, and there's a lot of bigger reasons why I think, we're segregated into these different zones, right? But I think what happens is the law really honed in on some of the illegal activities that were going on. And unfortunately, based off of us being the newcomers into the States, we kind of fell into these zones, right? So I think really what happened is that really took over, and it affected the Black community, affected the Latin community. It affected, I mean, normally it's not affecting the majority of the white community per se, right?
Oh, do
This
you believe
pigmentation
living in
America.
this one is what you, do you believe living in America is different as a black man versus Latino man versus a white man?
Yes, negatively and positively. I think there's benefits for all the cultures. Now, I don't know if you can speak to this because and the curious question is, man, and so I was going to ask you with this question. This is what I was going next. If you could next year, for some reason, just be a white man, would you take that opportunity?
Nope.
Why?
I mean, if it was just for a year and I was applying for a house,
That's what I'm saying. So, but that's exactly where he went. He went to
long as I could go
financial
back.
stability or
As long as
something
I
along
could
those
go
lines.
back. You know, you
I
go
think
black.
Latino.
Go ahead, my bad.
Sorry, can I answer that as the host? I don't know if I
Go
can.
ahead.
Just as a Latino, I take pride in being Latino.
Right.
I love it.
And the point of it too goes to the fact that, you know, like I made a comment the other day to Vince and to Rakim here. I believe, for example, my personal opinion is racism is the color of your mind, not the color of your skin.
Yeah.
You know, so when you come realistic to this,
Take it even deeper, the culture of your mind, not the culture.
well, yeah, but you know, it goes to the point where, listen, for me, it has not been no difficulty being Hispanic, being darker than you, to find whatever I wanted to find. Actually, being Hispanic has opened a lot of doors for me because now I know Spanish and I know English. Because I'm American, I could do whatever I want to do in and out whenever I want to come in and out. You know, it has opened doors for me to travel the whole world as I've done it through my business. So realistically, it comes to the point that I believe, and this is me, Jose, that the same group of black people there are in the poverty, the Hispanic, they've been in the poverty, those also the white people that are in the poverty. The difference in numbers, yeah, probably there's a big difference in percentages. But I believe that is where you stand. In the first show we did, Rakim, they said something really, really impacting towards me, and I always repeat it to him. The way he dressed is to improve himself. Yeah. So if you don't improve yourself, you're not gonna be able to move forward. Right. It's go back again. The color of your mind is what is racist, not the color of your skin. If you, like he said, culturally, you block, you mad at the world because, you know, I'm black. That's why I don't like the word African American. I don't, because, you know, are you African for real? Do you know, can you go pinpoint back who was African in your culture?
Where you from?
Or where you from? And if you go, probably, if we do all 23 and me, I'm not probably 100%.
I agree with you, and while that is how we should view things in America, I don't know if that's actually how it's viewed. However, and I think that should be where, as men, we should all want to aspire to be. And I think that's important for everyone to see, everyone to hear, because at the end of the day, that's what we want. I'm just going to read a couple statistics, and we're going to move into the differences between men and women. These statistics are just pulled from AmericanProgress.org. It's an organization that pulls statistics for those that are minority and wish to give a spotlight just to those differences. People of color are significantly overrepresented in the U.S. population by making up more than 60% of people behind bars. Despite being only 13% of the overall population, 40% of those who are incarcerated are actually black. Latinos represent 16% of the overall population, but 19% of those are who are incarcerated. Now, again, I say Latinos and blacks here, but let's face it, America likes to put the darker you are, you're black. Doesn't matter if you're Latino. So these statistics don't even pull the Latinos who are actually lumped into the black category. So on the other hand, whites make up to 64% of the overall population, but account for only 39% of those incarcerated. Now you say, well, 39% is close to 40%, but when you look at the overall populations, they are winning out on that statistic. Again, these are statistics. We live our everyday lives. We get it. People of color are more likely to be entangled in the criminal justice systems. Among black males born in 2001, 1 in 3 will go to prison at some point. 1 in 6 Latinos will go to prison, as opposed to 1 in 17 white males will go to prison. Similarly, just for women, 1 in 111 white women, 1 in 18 for black women, and 1 in 45 Latino women. People of color face harsher sentences. Here in America, especially men of color, and there's actually a difference between men and women when it comes to sentencing. Women get a least harsher sentencing structure when it comes to us as men in this country. During traffic stops, people of color are more likely to be searched without a consent or without knowledge of how the law works than those of their white counterparts. Students of color face harsher punishments at school than their white non-Hispanic counterparts. People of color are extremely overrepresented in the juvenile justice system. About 67% of juveniles committed to public facilities nationwide are of color, comprising of about 15% of that are black juveniles, arrested 2 times more than their white counterparts. And of course, we all know about voter restriction. What just happened here in Florida with that was appalling, to say the least. It's what I think. Of course, everybody can give their own viewpoints. In Florida, Kentucky, and Virginia, more than 1 in 5 black adults are denied the right to vote. And that's purely based on, all these things are stacked against certain individuals based on the color of their skin, which, you're right, like Jose says, we want to have those types of things, but sometimes it's very difficult when things are like stacked over here. They're not so much stacked over here. There's no balance, so it's like this. You know what I'm saying? So like they win, you know what I mean? Or who's not, like it's all viewpoint at that point too. So with that being said, do you guys think women are held to the same accountability that men are when it comes to the criminal justice system?
I think we have to be honest with ourselves as men. Naturally men are more aggressive by nature. Biologically, we get more fights. We are not as well mannered or well tempered, and that's just biological aspects of our nature. And so, since that's the case, and also a lot of abuse cases are men against women, so that accounts for a lot of heavy amount of people going into prison as well. So I think that it's not necessarily bias. However, women need to be held accountable for their actions as well, and I think we don't see that necessarily. So I think it's a mixed bag of women who are not held accountable, but we also need to be honest with ourselves. We unfortunately are given a responsibility, since we have biologically a more dominant physical appearance than women. We have to be careful with, great power comes great responsibility, with our duties to be respectful and proper towards handling those situations. So I don't know if you guys agree or disagree.
I think it goes to a couple different factors.
Yeah.
So men are normally more lenient with women, right? So for instance, you'll hit a man, but you won't hit a woman, right? So
correct.
Is that because they're less threatening?
I would say because they're less physically capable of protecting themselves. Yeah, they're physically not strong, right? So that's just like physically, right? So, but I think if you propel that,
Well, I
right?
think what you mean is not that they're not physically not strong, but
They're not
biologically, unless they actually take like
Hold on. I want to ask a question. So you're telling me
trying to help him.
physically, women are no match for you.
There's a couple women out there they may be able to choke slam me. I've lost a lot of weight lately.
That's what we're accounting.
No, but what I'm saying,
We have to be honest.
yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not offending the female population by saying
No,
that.
of course.
I think, men are seen as more of an aggressor and women are seen as more docile, right? And I think that's like the common role, right? So men are the protectors, right? That's kind of like the role that humanity has placed on men. Yeah. So I think when you propel it up the legal system and you see what that, I mean, let's think about what does that really look like to answer the question. Mm-hmm. The person that's normally sentencing is normally a male, right? And then let's say in this scenario, the person that's taking that sentence is a female. So let's say that's stacked. I'm just thinking logically, right? How are they emotionally going to be struck when, let's say she says, any final words, before you're sentencing, and she says, you know what, like what I did was wrong. Like I'm just trying to be a good mom. I normally don't sell drugs, but I was doing it for my 3 kids. And I'm not saying that that's I'm not saying that that's the narrative in every single case, but I'm saying like let's just think about that.
But that was my next point. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I want to read this because I want this to get out real quick before actually, unfortunately, my tablet will die and we'll have free session. But I want to read this and then I want to ask a question to what you just said. So women are less likely to be detained before trial. They are actually 46% less likely than men to be held in jail prior to a trial. Women who are released on bond are given actual lower bond amounts and the bonds are set about 54% lower than what men would be required to pay. Women are 58% less likely to be sentenced to prison. By the way, this is from journalistresource.org. You can look that up. And it'll also be in the video below. So defendants who were sentenced to prison, there generally was no gender disparity in the length of that sentence. However, there are disparities in sentencing for some individual types of crimes. Female defendants convicted for theft receive longer prison sentences actually than men. So that's vice versa. But women convicted of other property offenses, which include arson, stolen property, breaking and entering, receive shorter prison sentences.
Oh, that sounds like the man cheated on her. Those last parts.
But
Yeah, you're stealing from the man. You're going to jail. You're stealing from him.
here's where it gets interesting. Black female defendants were in some ways treated differently than white female defendants, but still have, they'll have higher bonds than white women, but they still have lower bonds than black men, white men, and Hispanic.
We don't want to see women cry. That's it. I'll be honest with you, man. Women will make you feel bad, and not make you, but we feel bad when we hurt women, man. So naturally, the sentence is going to be shorter. We're going to not want to punish, and that's where that comes from, man. We have a tendency to want to care and protect our women, all women, for most. And you can disagree with me if you want, but I feel like you've seen a woman cry, and I know how ugly that feels when you see women feeling
So
bad.
do you think that women know how to act better than men when they walk up in that courtroom? Do you think that us as men,
Naturally, I think it's a natural thing.
Do you think that we're just naturally aggressive people?
Yeah.
Or we're viewed as aggressive before we open our mouths, so why don't we just fit the role? Like, is that the mentality that we have when we walk in the courtroom?
I don't think people have sympathy for a man's struggles. Why should they? We're supposed to be strong and providers, and that's the mentality of the stereotype of our society is why should I care if you're crying as a man? You need to be handling yourself better than this. But for women, I think they're given a break.
So touching on that note,
Sure.
Yeah.
that goes into men's mental health. That goes into men's accountability from a society standpoint. That is something that we should probably talk about. I like that. What do you think women? Do you think women manipulate that system in order to get out of things that maybe were actually harmful to them, or like a man or whatever?
Not all women.
We all do. Why are we lying? You ever get a ticket? Tell me, when I win a ticket,
You take
I
your
got
shirt
a
off?
lot of tickets.
You
I've
know,
gotten a lot of tickets. I used to have a Mustang Roush.
His name
That
is
thing.
Alejandro.
Yeah.
We don't know.
But honestly, I think if we're all being honest, like we all do our best to not get the sentence, right? Whether, when you're getting ready in the morning, if you know you're going to go to a hearing for whatever reason, right? You think, at least for me, I'm like, what's going to make me look less of guilty, right? Me personally, I've been in sales my whole life, so I'm like, I'm going to wear white, I'm going to wear blue.
Right, calming colors.
Yeah, things that white strikes purity, blue is trust. So this is actually navy blue. So this says I'm pure, but still a little reckless,
So white inspires purity.
So I think one of the biggest thing is, we all kind of do it, and I think it's easier to say that a woman does it because you can see it very physically sometimes, right? Like if a woman starts crying, like she's manipulating the system. But if a man goes in there, he's like, I'm really sorry. No, you're not sorry. This is the 10th time you've done it. You're not sorry, right? But I think we all, in one way or another, do manipulate the system, right? So,
or try to, right?
try in one way or another, yeah.
I think that kind of goes into what's acceptable for the emotions guys are allowed to really have.
Yeah.
Because if you see a guy crying, it's like, you just normally don't see that.
Yeah.
We were talking about that what was it, about a week ago, when we said only time I ever cry is when I am mad, and then that comes with some type of physical reaction, and that's wrong. Like that's not. I should be able to feel comfortable expressing my emotions, but through and through, the system has told us we can't, even to that.
But the thing is that good that you guys touched that point because I've been thinking about it. Crimes made by men are a little bit higher on the fact that it's hurting somebody, are more violent.
The statistics that I read actually counteract that. From the article, I apologize, my thing died. They actually say that women and men now today make the same amount of equal physical type of crimes, but still redeem that?
Not talking only about physical.
Okay.
You know, about harm, damage. You know, you could probably, let's say, for example, and I could tell you from my perspective, my mom was arrested. The reason my mom didn't raise me is because she was arrested.
Right.
You know, and honestly, I remember the day that we were in sentencing, the judge came and asked us how we felt about it, because he was gonna send my mom away. And he was a female judge, was not a male judge. And actually, she was really hard on my mom because she questioned, you have 3 kids, a new kid that just has 30 days born, and you still doing what you're doing. So you're not valuing what you have. But in the other side, for example, it was for drug trafficking. When a male does drug trafficking, it doesn't stop on drug trafficking. Probably is arrested with a gun in him. Probably have priors on him. No matter what color of skin. You know, right now, for example, about female judging, the lady the cop that just went to the wrong apartment and killed the owner of the apartment, it was a female who was doing the sentencing, the judge. But I do agree on the emotions, because how come she was a black female? But
She was a white female.
no, she was a black female. The judge.
The judge.
Okay, yeah.
The judge was a black female.
Yes. Okay.
And after sentencing, yes, the younger brother of the guy, say, I forgive her. And the judge, something you never seen in a judge, he went down and hugged her and said, everything's going to be okay. So,
Sympathetic, yeah, aspect.
but still, you know, she was harsh, but she was sympathetic. You know, but at the same time, I agree that, you know, when it comes to men, you don't see that. Because also, men don't want to cry. Because like you said, they just want to show it. You know, I think if you will see a stronger repentant on what the action were, you might see probably a lower number. I had the opportunity to work in different jails in Miami, and I moved some policies to make happen that, you know, incarcerated parents have the opportunity to have one-on-one with their kids and outside that environment where it's restricted. You know, and I was sharing this with Vince the other day. I heard a case where I talked to the guy and he said, I haven't seen my dad in X amount of years till I get to jail. And I saw my dad.
Yeah.
And my granddad was in jail. And you know, now my frustration is when I come out, I want to do the same thing, because I don't want my kid to come and meet me here.
So do you, thank you. Do you, that goes into a couple of things like opportunities. It goes into what is afforded to men as opposed to women. And secondly, like you were saying with the crying and stuff like that, and the drug trafficking, they probably have a gun on them and stuff like that. Men, we have a natural desire to prove ourselves beyond what a woman does. And whether that comes from wherever that comes from, do you think that is the reason why we have harsher punishments, as well as we go further into the crimes that are committed as men?
I think that could be. I mean, if you take us to our primal nature, right? It's all a competition.
But you know what? Women are doing the same damn thing, man. Their objective is to look for a better mate, a more suitable mate, who's got more financial stability, so they can take care of that. For thousands of years in the course of human history, the man has been the protector, provider of the family. And so now we're thrust in the environment in the last 20 years even, where it's kind of shifting a little bit. And so it becomes politically incorrect to say that, when honestly, it's tough to get rid of the instinctual basis we have our eyes set on, where she can take care of herself, she can be nurturing, she can help the young. And so we want that. And at the end of the day, to go to the original question of why we're sympathetic to women, we hold women in our arms. They don't hold us in their arms. I mean, there are cases where your wife might hold you in your arms or things like that. But at the end of the day, that's the case. We are protecting her.
But remember also,
and that's the instinct.
if you go back to psychology, you know, nature versus, you know, nurture.
Right.
You are more sympathetic to women because you had a mom.
Exactly. But
Because you had a female that actually nurtured you, carried you, gave you love.
Well, let me hear your opinion.
So
That you're going, like, you have that disadvantage, I guess you could say.
no, I'm stronger. I'm harder with when it comes to accepting or not accepting. I think I'm equally, because I do believe, you know, my perspective, and it's something that my wife actually had helped me think differently, is that if you're asking for equality, then you should have complete equality across the board.
Right. equal. Like I always say,
rights or equal
if you're either 100% for something or you're 100% against it. Period. Point blank. I like that. Sorry, just thought
That's something, because at first I was like, because most of my life I was raised by my grandmother, and then my dad by himself, and my abuela always told me, you don't touch the roses, because if you touch the petals of the roses too much, they die. So the same with the female, you never touch a female because you're hurting her. So I kept that for a long time until my wife told me one time they had to be held accountable also. My wife is really against feminist. Like my wife is like really strong on it. And she told me if a female wants to be equally to a man, then they should work equally. If you want equal pay for construction, then you should work equally in construction. So that's where I hold my standards now. My daughter, we had a huge conversation yesterday from 10 to 2 in the morning. Yesterday with my daughter. And I told her, Mama, you dropping the ball. You want certain things, you need to then elevate what you're doing. And because if we continue that programming, because the mind is programming. If we continue the programming of the mind as, okay, you're a girl, you could get away with it. We never would change.
Exactly.
Never would change.
So with that being said, which I love all these opinions. I think they're amazing. Where do we go from here? Like you said with your daughter and elevating her to seek out what she wants to seek out, she should in turn receive it, should also seek out responsibility of that decision. Mm-hmm. I love that self-responsibility is important. Do you think there's other ways that we can make a difference and change it as men, right? Encouraging our women or encouraging our children to do the same. Do you think that we can do better? Or do you think that we are already trying to, it's just not being seen?
I think we're not trying hard enough.
All right.
We're not honest enough. We're just lying to ourselves, man.
In general.
The society's. We just need to go back to being honest, man. Go back to the primal instinct thing. We just need to stop pretending that this facade that's our society's made up is done, man. We need to go back to being honest. A woman could be a prize just like you can be a prize for her, and not in a negative way, but being, that's a good goal to have, And to going off your thing, women could be nurturing and empowering, both things.
So with it's Rakim, you have just because like a beautiful business that talks about love and wanting to romance plan and giving somebody that perfect moment. What do you think about all this? What do you think the dynamics between a man and woman should be, and how does that look for you?
Luis touched on what did you touch on earlier? You said something about I'm gonna lose it.
Yeah.
But can you reword it one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Does your business help you identify what love or what relationship should be like between a man and a woman, and just in general, between a man and a woman? Does it help you?
Love language is what he touched on earlier. And I think that we need to really just dial back, besides being honest, which is a huge part of it, because we can all, retweet what we agree with, but we don't want to work on. We all need to be honest with ourselves for the change that we want to see. Stop waiting on somebody else to articulate it for us. Ask for help. We need to be humble, but also we need to be humble enough to accept that, my love language might not be yours and you're more important than me just translating mine. So let me understand yours better. And I think that could be a good first step to all of us understanding one another more.
Continuous self-improvement is something we don't teach our youth enough. And if we teach our young males to continually self-improve, we can then change society to where it needs to be and go. So that I think that, because you're saying I need to find a strategy to teach my wife or show my wife the love language. That's continuous self-improvement. And if that progression, we can teach it to our youth, I think we could see tremendous results.
Yeah. And on that, I appreciate all of your time. Thank you so much for joining in, everyone. And have a wonderful, great night.
I do believe it's so.